Hey everyone, today on League of Legends Minis, I'm going to talk about an element of team play, something called the power play. If you aren't familiar with the phrase power play, it's a phrase that comes from several sports and it means that you have a man advantage, usually because the opposing team was penalized in some way. In League of Legends, a similar concept exists. Basically, if you ever find yourself outnumbering the enemy, either because you got a kill or several kills through picks or a team fight, or just out-rotating them on the map, you have yourself a power play. And just like in sports, your team should take advantage of this time when you have extra players and push for even more advantages. In general, you should be taking big objectives, like towers, dragons, and Baron. But you can also take smaller objectives, like the enemy red and blue buffs, or taking the large raptor, or smiting the merc wolf in the enemy jungle to create a wisp for your team so it tracks the enemies that walk into that area of the jungle. Or even just deep warding in the right locations, so you can get some really important information for up to 3 minutes. These are all viable strategies for when you have a power play, because in most cases, the enemy won't be able to contest you for the objective because they're outnumbered. When you have a power play, you gotta really assess the situation. If you have a power play and you can take a free objective, don't recall to base. There's no point. Always push for some kind of advantage in order to snowball your lead. The advantage to advantage push is basically the definition of snowballing, and if you don't do it, games will most likely draw out longer. In lower brackets, this is extremely common. Someone gets a kill or two, and then goes back to base to buy some shiny equipment, while the rest of your team, well, you outnumber the enemy team, and you could take at least 1 or 2 objectives, but the shiny new equipment is always better, right? No, not right. Definitely not right. This is also something that happens with jungle ganks. Let's say you're playing Victor mid, and your jungle Evelynn ganks for you. You two manage to get a kill on the enemy laner, and then Evelynn leaves you to go farm in her jungle, leaving the manaless Victor to auto-attack the wave instead of pushing the wave into the tower to deal damage to the tower, deny the enemy laner golden experience, and reset the lane. But who cares about that, right? Just go get your 60 gold from your camp instead. Both of these examples are things that happen pretty often, I'd say. These are huge advantages that you could be pushing for, but for some reason, a lot of players opt out of doing so. When you have a power play, you need to assess how much you can take from this advantage. There are several things you gotta keep an eye out for. The first one is comparing HP bars between your team and the enemy team. Then, look out for champions with wave clear or some kind of potential threat to your team if you try to make a certain play. So, for example, if you try to siege a tower against a Xerath with blue buff, you're probably not going to take the tower because of his massive wave clear. And if you keep on pushing for no reason, then you're just wasting time. If you want to take Dragon, and the enemy team has a Lee Sin with Smite Up, and you have a Rek'Sai. Lee Sin's execute damage is higher than Rek'Sai's burst, which makes the Smite War more advantageous for the enemy team. Or let's say you want to take Baron, and the enemy team has maybe an Azir or an Orianna as their mid laner. Well, they can poke you down and destroy you with their AoEs and crowd control while you're weakened from taking damage from Baron and getting debuffed. This is generally what people call a Baron throw. Final example, let's say you're trying to get a deep ward in the enemy jungle, but the enemy team, they have a Nautilus or a Thresh or Leona as their support. You could get picked off really easily because of all that crowd control. So unless your team stays with you, it's extremely dangerous to go for those deep wards. These are just some of the examples of power plays that could go wrong. There are nearly endless possibilities, so you really need to properly assess the situation before you act. And finally, the last point, keep an eye on the death timers and the map. If the enemy team is alive and or regrouping, you don't have a power play anymore. If you overstay your welcome, just like in sports, your team will be exhausted, which could result in the enemy team counterattacking against a fatigued team and getting the advantage. Proper utilization of power plays is what wins games. This is one of the most basic concepts that everyone actually knows deep down, but they have trouble actively applying it to their game. Once you learn how to apply it, once this becomes second nature to you, you'll probably start winning a lot more games. Anyway, that's it for this episode. I hope you enjoyed it, and as always, thanks for watching and see you next time.